Hello, everyone, and picture this. You have been house hunting for weeks. You've written offers, you've survived inspections, you have made it through the appraisal, and submitted what probably feels like about 400 documents to your lender. Well, today is finally closing day. And then someone slides a stack of papers in front of you that's about this thick. Don't worry, that's what we are going to talk through today, and you don't have to be a lawyer to understand what's going on, but we're going to break it down. And if you didn't know, this is the No BS Homebuyers Live series where we are breaking down the full home buying process into simple, no BS steps to get you from thinking about buying to actually owning a home. So we are going to walk through what actually happens on closing day, the big, exciting day, and we're going to give you just a little heads up so when you are there, you know what's going on. All right. Believe it or not, most of everything that's happening on closing day has happened well before you walked into the office to sign your paperwork. So, we're going to talk about the final loan approval, which is also known as a clear to close. And that is when the bank says, hey, yep, we have got the okay, you are good to go and close on this loan. They will give that final couple days, but you still can't change anything with your finances because they will be tracking you all the way until you sign. They will be tracking your finances. So even with the clear to close, make sure you're not changing any of your financial picture until you have signed on the dotted line. Typically, it's not actually dotted. Anyway, you are also going to come across what is known as a closing disclosure. You should have received this at least 3 days before your closing. This is the one with all the numbers on it and all the fees and everything listed out in line by line. Almost looks like an accounting worksheet or like a math sheet that you would have at math class. The title company is going to have one, and then your lender is also going to have one, different format, but saying the same things. And that sheet, again, you will have received before closing, but it will tell you how much money you need to bring to the closing table. Or in a recent example with actually a buyer from this course, they actually got a check, which isn't very common, but can happen. But anyway, so you'll get that disclosure, the closing disclosure, at least 3 days before closing, so that way you know how much money you need to be bringing to the table. You'll have done your final walkthrough, checked and made sure that everything is good there. And if it wasn't, you'll be working on getting those fixed or coming up with a solution before you actually sign. And then you're also going to get wiring instructions. And I am going to go a little bit more into wiring in a little bit, but some of the things to be aware of or the faux pas of wiring stuff, because there is a lot of fraud going on. So I will dig into that a little bit later. But this is the time that you should take to read, ask questions. Typically, you want to try to do it before, so that way if something does have to change, you don't have to change it that day and delay things. But you should be reading through your closing disclosure statement. If you have questions, ask your lender, or if something looks off or something is missing, talk to your realtor. They can help. A lot of things can easily get missed. For example, like if you did your inspection and you paid for your inspection at the time of the inspection, but then they also charge you on the closing disclosure, you want to make sure to get that cleared up so you're not double paying. So make sure to read through that, understand what is on it, because that is the numbers of actually buying a home. And then let's talk about the money. That closing disclosure will have an amount that you're supposed to bring, also known as your cash to close. Depending on how your contract was written, that could be your down payment, closing costs. If you maybe got a credit, maybe some of that was subtracted out. Or like if you're in our state, Nebraska, your taxes are in arrears, so you get a credit for taxes and da 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 da. So all of that will be on there, but the bottom line will tell you how much you need to bring. And typically you're doing that through a wire transfer or a cashier's check. I don't know of any situation that you can bring like a personal check, unless maybe it was like under $10. I don't know. I don't know if that would work. But typically they want at least a cashier's check and more commonly a wire. And this is where I am going to talk about wire fraud, because it is a very, very serious thing that has robbed a lot of people of money. There was actually a case here in Lincoln that someone wired like $300,000. They were buying a house cash and they sent it to the wrong wire instruction. Like they sent it to the wrong place because they got frauded out on their wire instructions. And I actually don't know how that ended up. So, but I do know it wasn't good because there's $300,000 missing all of a sudden. So anyway, so wire fraud. What a typical situation that is going to happen is the title company is going to send you wire instructions, most commonly through an email. That wiring instruction should never ever change. You should always, absolutely always verify the wire before sending it. When I've sent wires, I do this in the bank while I am sending the wire. I call the number that I find online on Google for the company that I need to verify with. So, for example, I used a title company, and rather than use the phone number that came on the email, because that gets changed also when hackers fraud you, I Googled the title company's name, clicked the Google thing, the Google phone, called them direct from Google because it's very hard to fraud a Google number, talked to them, asked for my closer, confirmed the wire instructions with them at the time at the bank, and then I sent my money. So some tips and tricks that you just really got to be aware of is they should never ever change the wire instructions. You always want to check the email very closely. So a lot of times, like title companies, it will have ABC title and then at or like name of title agent at abctitle.com. Make sure that the I in title is actually an I. A lot of scammers will change it to an L or something like that, like very close letters. So really double check that. Again, call the Google the phone number, call the Google phone number, not the number on the paper or the instructions. And if you ever are worried, just call title, confirm. The bank that's helping send it to, you can talk with them as well. So just please always be very careful. Wire fraud is such a big deal and it's very hard to track that money and get that back. I don't know if you can, to be honest. Anyway, and another big red flag, if someone's telling you to hurry and wire the money without verifying any of the instructions, slow down, stop. That is a huge red flag. That's probably not a real person. Things take time and your title company should be willing to work with you and not be rushing you and making you feel rushed. That's just a big red flag. Okay, anyway, I will get off my wire fraud soapbox. But now let's go into some of the documents that you're going to sign. And you don't need to memorize all of these documents, but these are just things that you're likely going to see that's in that nice large stack of paperwork, depending on your loan. But that would be the closing disclosure, which we already discussed. And you'll probably have two copies of them, one from the title company, one from the lender. If you're in a state that doesn't use title companies and just does brokers or attorneys, they will probably still have their own version of the paperwork to cover their butts. You will have a promissory note, which is your promise to pay back the bank. The mortgage or a deed of trust kind of depends on what state you're in. Some of the names of these documents will change a little bit. The promissory note is important to kind of touch on and go over, and you can always ask for this documentation ahead of time so you can read it because it seriously can be quite a stack. But the promissory note is just laying out like, hey, if you have a mortgage that you're going to be paying on this day, it's late on this day, typically due on the 1st, late on the 15th. They do that because people get paid at different times, so you can kind of have some time there. You do want to make sure that you're paying attention to like business days, etc. And what would happen if you quit paying? And that can be penalty fees, that can be the foreclosure process, which I hope you never have to deal with, but that is laid out in that document. So that way, if you ever got into a situation, you have that to reference back to. Please note, if you're ever in a foreclosure situation, it is best to talk with the bank and see if there are other options before you actually foreclose. A lot of times they want to work with you. It is expensive to foreclose on a house for a bank, and they really don't walk away with much money in most cases. So they would much rather make a solution with you than foreclose on you. Anyway, okay. And then potentially a settlement statement as well. And there may be different affidavits or acknowledgments. So there could be like you are part of an HOA acknowledgement, or you're agreeing to live in the property for a year because of the loan type that you have. And then you could turn it into a rental, or you could never turn it into a rental. They're just depending on your loan, will have different affidavits and acknowledgments. But your closing agent, your title agent, or in some states, your broker's agent or the attorney can all walk you through this. They should be familiar with the paperwork and be able to help explain what you're signing. They can't give you legal advice, but they can explain what the document is. But you're never expected to sign something that you don't understand. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You are, probably purchasing one of the biggest purchases in your life, so it's okay to ask questions. All right, now let's talk about who's at the closing table. And this really will depend on the market. Where I'm from, it is typically just the buyer and the buyer's agent. Sometimes you will also see a seller's agent come, just to make sure that everything closes and answer any kind of questions. Uh, Obviously, those would be your realtors. You'll have the title company or the attorney closing, or the broker, or whoever's closing the actual documents. Um, and and oftentimes you'll have the lender, especially if they're like a local lender. A lot of times they'll come to the closings too and explain their documents specifically, and then let title handle more of the deed set and the things getting filed with the state. But every state handles closings a little differently. I listened to a podcast of some gals in Louisiana, and it is very commonplace for the actual sellers and the buyers to be at the same table, which I find hard to imagine because that could get very contentious in certain situations. So I'm happy where I'm at. We do not do that. But ask your realtor what is commonplace, because you may be surprised if that is common in your state. But what do you do when you get the keys? And or like, when do you actually get the keys? This is what everyone wants to know. I bought the house. When do I get to move in? Usually it is after all the documents are signed, the transaction is funded. So your bank the one lending the mortgage sends over the funds to the actual title company. And potentially even after the deed is recorded. This is not commonplace in my state. It could be in other states. But those are typically the three things. Like where we are here locally, it's once you've signed and everything's funded, which normally happens pretty simultaneously. But most of the time it's pretty immediate. You walk away with the keys after you sign. Sometimes it's a little later in the day, depending on when your money wires. And very rarely, I would say, like next business day. But most of the time you're signing papers and then you get the keys. But please confirm with your realtor if that's going to be something different. But that is kind of the whole big overview of closing day. What you need to bring to closing day is your check to close, whether that's a cashier's check or you wire the money. You need an ID, and I harp on this with my buyers all the time, a valid ID. So that would be something with like a photo, think a driver's license. But if your driver's license is expired, that is no longer valid. So please make sure your driver's licenses are up to date, or state IDs. I don't know of people using other kinds of IDs, maybe like a passport, but I don't think like your work ID with a photo would count. So professional legal identity documents. And then once you become a homeowner, congratulations. That's so exciting. You've signed that huge stack of papers. You'll get a copy with it to go home. They will get you a copy of the deed, and you will get spammed because your name is now on the public information in most cases. So be aware that people are going to try selling you a deed, a copy of your deed for like $90. Call the title company and get it for free. There's also going to be people trying to sell you additional home warranties, or they're going to send you a bunch of spam that looks like it came from the bank that you got your loan through, but really it's not. And you got to like look for the fine print that says not affiliated with so-and-so bank. And so you just got to be aware of that, because now your name is going to be on the public record. So congratulations, homeowner. People want more of your money. Anyway, but once you become a homeowner, don't forget to celebrate. Change out the locks, locate the big water shutoffs, test your smoke detectors, put aside your important documents, and then have a little glass of champagne or tea, whatever is to your flavor, and celebrate the moment, because you have done all the hard work and here you are, a homeowner. So don't forget, closing day isn't just about the paperwork. Once you get through that, you get the keys at the end and you get a house to call home. And make sure that you are celebrating. There will be signatures, there will be documents, but there is also that incredible moment when you get the keys. So don't forget, this isn't the end of everything. This is the end of the buying process, which we have discussed in length in detail the past couple of weeks. So if you are getting ready to buy a home and you want to get through to this part of the process, please reach out. I'd love to help you if you're locally here with me in Lincoln, or I would love to get you set up with an agent wherever you are, and I will refer an agent to you. So next week, I am still kind of deciding exactly where we're going to go with this. There are a couple of additional topics that I could dive into more on the actual owning of a home, and there are a couple other topics like pre-ownership that I can for sure dive into, but I might change it up a little bit. I haven't fully decided. I would plan to see me next week, but if not, I will be sure to give you an update. And don't forget, this is the No BS Home Buyers Live series, where we are taking simple, easy steps to get you to go from thinking about buying to actually owning a home. And I'm so thankful you've been here with me through this whole long process. And I hope you feel more educated and more ready for yourself when you are ready to do this. So thank you again, and planning on seeing you next week. Bye-bye.